No, not yet, Aura. Sorry. I'm waiting for someone in the room to leave. Okay. All right, we're good. So let's see. Focus question. All right, you know what? Before the focus question, I think it's important for us to kind of start thinking about what we want to do for the final exam. We are doing 50 multiple choice. That's not changing. And we are doing an essay. The choice you're going to have as a class, and we'll just do a simple vote on Google Form within the next week so we know. Next week, we'll take a vote on if we're going to want to do a DBQ essay or a thematic essay. I'll highlight some more pros and cons, but just to kind of get into your brain a little bit, the DBQ essay obviously comes with the 9 DBQ documents and then leads into an essay. So that would mean it would be a little bit more work, but the good thing is it should be a little bit easier because a lot of the essay writes itself from the, the scaffold questions and the short answer questions. So start thinking about maybe if you want to do that, or if you'd rather do a thematic essay. A thematic essay is literally just a prompt. There's no DBQ document. It's just, here's an essay. You get about 10 topics. You have to pick about 2 of them centered around theme. Both are written very similarly, but, one's going to be a little bit longer. And I would probably say it's all a matter of preference. But if you're a good social studies thinker, then the thematic essay is probably easier. If you're not as good at social studies, but very good in ELA, then the DBQ is probably easier. So start thinking about which one you're going to want to do, and we'll vote on as a class sometime next week. All right. Are there any questions on that? Your final will be on June 18th. It will be 50 multiple choice and one of the essays. So if you have questions on that, ask it now. Otherwise, start thinking about which essay you're going to want to do, which essay you're more comfortable with. We did 2 each this year, so you should be, have an equal amount of work with them. All right. So I'll keep an eye on the chat if there's questions. If there's not, today's a very straightforward day. We're looking at Bill Clinton's presidency. He takes over after George H.W. Bush, who you guys should have looked at for the double period yesterday. Ultimately, today is just a notes day, so if you take good notes, you should be fine. You just have to post the notes by the end. We have notes and a video, and that's really all we're doing. With that being said, I think if you have the final review work that you have to do, that would be great too. If you have some extra time today, that might be a good thing to work on because that is due on Friday. Usually due on Thursday, but since it was a shorter week, I moved it to Friday, so you guys have an extra day to do that. All right? So the focus question is, what were the highlights of Bill Clinton's presidency? He was a 2-term president from 1992 to 2000. He has, like every other president, some good things, some bad things. I would definitely say we'll go over both, and we'll kind of let you kind of make your determination and go from there. So Ronald Reagan, when he was president in 1980, won in a big landslide. In 1984, he won his re-election in a pretty big landslide. And then in 1988, when he was running for president, he wasn't running for president. His vice president, George H.W. Bush, took over. He won pretty big. So 3 straight years we had Republican presidents. But something happens in 1992 that was a little unexpected. Not necessarily that Bill Clinton won, but there was a third-party candidate. His name was Ross Perot. If you Google him, he's pretty much known for having, I think, a big nose. I was very young when this election went down, so I don't remember anything from it. But I do remember Ross Perot had a very big nose. And what was interesting was Ross Perot was very similar to George H.W. Bush. So if you remember the election of 1912 way back, when you had Woodrow Wilson, Teddy Roosevelt, and William Taft all running for president. William Taft and Teddy Roosevelt took votes away from one another, so Woodrow Wilson got elected with only like 39% of the vote. George H.W. Bush is going to have about 8% of his vote taken away, and that's going to leave Bill Clinton the opportunity to become elected as the next president. Okay, Bill Clinton ran a great campaign, but it was a little bit of a surprise how well Ross Perot did that took votes away from George H.W. Bush. All right. Ms. Padva, I don't think we have 8D6 today. I think I see them tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So things we're going to look at today are there are these wars that break out in Bosnia and Kosovo that, you know, Bill Clinton makes some pretty good decisions with. I know we have some Albanian students here that probably know a little bit more about the Kosovo issues than even I do, but we'll talk about that a little bit. He created something called NAFTA, which comes out to be a very cool and important thing early on. Last few years, not as great, but you know, definitely something pretty cool at the time. The economy did very well under him, but he's also very well known for what his impeachment trial was all about. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And we're going to have, like, I know it's June, we have to have a little bit of an adult conversation with his impeachment trial because it does have to do with the sexual relationship. And I don't really know how else to teach it other than just teaching it as openly and honestly as I can. All right, so we'll go over all this. What we're going to do is we're going to watch a brain pop just overview of Bill Clinton. Going to go through how he rose to power, some of the things he did, and then obviously we'll take our notes in it, but I think this is a good way to kind of get us started. All right, so give me a second here to set it up. Right, keep an eye on the chat. I'll kind of fill it in, but I'm going to pretty much let it play uninterrupted. We'll go over a lot of this with the notes, but this is just a little good summary of his presidency coming up.
Who taught you how to play like that? Yeah, right, and I'm Al Gore. Dear Tim and Moby, who is Bill Clinton, and was he president? From Benjamin. It sure was, Benjamin.
Besides playing a mean saxophone, William Jefferson Clinton is probably best known as the 42nd President of the United States.
He was in office from 1993 to 2001. Though it was a time of peace and prosperity, a series of scandals almost got him kicked out of office. Well, it wasn't his first brush with adversity. Clinton was born in Hope, Arkansas, in 1946, just 3 months after his father died in a car accident. His family was poor, but he excelled as a student and a musician. He decided to enter public service after meeting his hero, President John F. Kennedy. As a young man, Clinton attended Yale Law School, where he met fellow law student Hillary Rodham. They got married a few years later. Then came political success. At the young age of 32, Clinton was elected Arkansas's governor. He held that office for 12 years, making big changes to the state's economy and education system. He also forged a reputation as a man of the people, a governor who really seemed to care about the problems of the poor and middle class. Of course, not everyone loved him. In fact, some saw his friendly, easygoing manner as, well, sort of phony. Either way, Clinton was a rising star, and in 1992, the Democratic Party chose him as its candidate for president. The country was going through a recession, or economic slowdown, and the president at the time, George H.W. Bush, got a lot of the blame. So Clinton campaigned on a platform of change, which turned out to be a winning strategy. His election came at a historical turning point. The Cold War, a decades-long standoff with the Soviet Union, had just ended. Clinton was the first president in almost 50 years with no military experience. His election seemed to reflect the country's desire to turn inward and focus on domestic problems like poverty and health care. His administration was filled with people who brought youth and freshness to the White House. Well, his first term had its highs and lows. He passed laws that helped those in need, like one that let parents take time off work to care for a new baby or a sick child. He made it harder for criminals to buy guns and signed a new trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. But two major setbacks damaged Clinton's image as a leader. 18 U.S. soldiers were killed during a mission in the African nation of Somalia. And Congress rejected his plan to reform America's healthcare system, which was one of his key campaign promises. But he successfully pushed through laws improving education and raising the minimum wage. In 1995, he sent troops into Bosnia to help stop a brutal campaign of violence there. And in 1996, he worked with Republicans to reform the welfare system. The changes were popular with Republicans, but angered many Democrats. They felt that Clinton had betrayed some of the party's core values. Clinton
Welfare system, I should just mention, are like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. That's just sometimes what it's called, the welfare system. So he actually, even though he was a Democrat, usually Democrats will provide more for government. He actually lessened some of the spending to that, which is pretty rare for a Democrat to do.
Easily won re-election in 1996. In his second term, he signed a law that brought health care coverage to millions of children. And he continued to flex American muscle overseas. He ordered the bombing of Iraq's illegal weapons program and sent peacekeeping troops to the war-torn region of Kosovo. At home, trouble was brewing behind the scenes. Back when Clinton was governor of Arkansas, he invested in a real estate project called Whitewater. He was accused of getting unfair benefits from the deal. During his first term as president, Congress assigned a lawyer named Kenneth Starr to look into the matter. Though Whitewater proved to be a dead end, Starr discovered that Clinton had had an improper relationship with a young White House intern. When asked about it in court, Clinton denied the accusation. Republicans in the House of Representatives voted to impeach him or accuse him of breaking the law, but the Senate found Clinton not guilty. He apologized to the nation and served out the rest of his term. Despite all that, most Americans still seem to trust Clinton as a leader. It didn't hurt that the tech industry fueled a major economic boom on his watch. By the end of his second term, unemployment was at an all-time low. The federal government was also enjoying a budget surplus, bringing in more money than it spent. So Clinton left office on a high note. Since then, he's continued to build on his legacy. He campaigned for Hillary for her successful Senate run in 2000, and when she ran for president in 2008 and 2016. He led disaster relief efforts after Hurricane Katrina, the Asian tsunami, and the Haitian earthquake. And he started the William J. Clinton Foundation, which tackles worldwide issues like AIDS prevention and global warming.
Okay, yeah, so he's still pretty active in American politics. Not necessarily him himself, but like he's still definitely around. So you guys probably knew of him, before today, which is pretty good. All right, so let's get into the notes now and just kind of go along with stuff. So let's take a look at him being an international peacekeeper. There were a lot of like these wars happening around Europe and Africa at the time, and there was two particular that came that shows up on the regions a little bit. One was in Bosnia in 1995, and one was in Kosovo, which has to do with Albania and Serbia in a little bit as well in 1999. So we'll talk about this shortly. Let's copy this down, and we'll go over it. Okay, in the mid-90s, the area of Southern Europe and Southeastern Europe really became an area where there were a lot of problems developing. And really none of it had much to do with the United States. But America, after winning the Cold War, is probably considered the biggest superpower in the world. So whenever there's a conflict that kind of breaks out, America feels like the obligation to go and help out. We can have a whole debate on whether that's right or wrong, but that's not the focus for now. The focus is we feel like we can at least help and restore peace to some of these areas. And in these two instances, we kind of do, though it's not a perfect situation. So let's first take a look at Bosnia. Bosnia is this kind of bluish country over here by the Adriatic Sea. And there's been a 4-year civil war going there. It's a complicated area, Bosnia and Czechoslovakia and Croatia, because there's been, over the last 30 to 40 years, there's been a lot of different changes of governments and a lot of different redrawings of country names. So like Czechoslovakia was a country in the 90s, but like in 1996, they changed its name to the Czech Republic and Slovakia, right? So it's very tough to follow what goes on, throughout this time. But basically there was a civil war within Bosnia, and there were a lot of, human rights civil penalties kind of be taken away throughout this point. And we're going to work with NATO to send in troops to try and help restore peace. We didn't send in troops necessarily to fight. We tried to become literal peacekeepers when this went on. And we went over to Bosnia, and we helped restore peace in Bosnia for the first time in over 4 years. Do you have to know about the details? No, not really. Just know that the Americans had some help in trying to help out the area of Bosnia. This is more of a world history thing. Kosovo, I'm going to really oversimplify, guys. I know we have Albanian students here. I'm going to not, give this the justice this deserves. I know this is a very complicated topic. Okay, but there's an area north of Albania, but south of Serbia called Kosovo. This is an area where I would say a lot of Albanians lived, and if I'm saying something incorrect, please let me know. A lot of Albanians lived in Kosovo, but the area was trying to be controlled by Serbia, and a lot of Albanians and Serbians did not really get along, and I don't think still do. Okay, even in 2021. So the Serbians launched a series of attacks against the Albanian troops and civilians. A lot of innocent people, were killed by Serbia that were in Kosovo throughout this time. I know one of my best friends, his wife was from Kosovo, came over to the United States in 1999, and they got married, in 2016. But I remember growing up with her in school and knowing a little bit about this. She literally had to escape out of Kosovo and come to the United States, and she moved to New York. Same type of thing. America and NATO sent in troops to stop the Serbian cruelty against the Albanians. We weren't able to fully stop it, but at least for a while, we were able to keep a little bit of peace throughout this time. So that is an extremely oversimplified version of the problems that happen in Kosovo, but that is America's role in kind of helping that. Okay, we don't completely fix the problem. We don't, prevent the problem, but we kind of like go in when the fight's already broken out, sort of thing. We try and just, settle everyone down. And at least we were successful in that throughout this time. All right. I think Regent's questions are popping up here, so let's use the chat to answer. President Clinton's decision to send troops into Bosnia and participate in the bombing of Kosovo were both in response over the international concern over what? Three is correct. Okay, human rights violations that kind of took place throughout this time. I can put this in the chat, I think, now. I remember how to do it. Oh, thanks, Lena. All right. So that is slide 1 of 3. This one is also pretty long. I'll give you a good amount of time for this one. I probably went too fast on that last one. So I'll give you 2 minutes before I even start talking about this. This is known as globalization. You need to know that word, and you need to know what NAFTA is. Okay, you need to know what NAFTA is. Both are made under Bill Clinton. How in the world, Reiners, did you do that quickly? Were you a speed typer? I appreciate you doing that. Very nice. Okay, so we want to globalize trade, and this has its pros, has its cons. I think in the 90s under Clinton, it was a good thing. I think over time, it started to hurt us a little bit, and I'll talk about how. I'll kind of give you both sides. But we want to become more globalized as a country. So since we're one of the biggest superpowers, we know we can't make everything in the United States. So we want to kind of, as like a globe, as a country, work with all the other countries to trade. And we first want to start with North America. Now, North America consists of a lot of different countries, okay? Obviously, the United States, Canada, and Mexico are the biggest ones, but you still have Cuba, Honduras, Belize, countries like that. All right, but we're going to take the 3 biggest countries in the continent of North America, all right, the United States, Mexico, and Canada. And what we want to do is we want to basically try and intertwine our 3 countries in terms of trade, okay? We want to integrate cultures, so we want to make it easy to travel from Mexico to the United States or to Canada. We want to make it easier. We want to trade worldviews, and we want to just work closely with our bordering countries, because the better friends you are with your bordering countries, the better, probably. All right? But really, NAFTA is really called the North American Free Trade Agreement. Okay, and if you know the major countries in North America, you know it has to do with Mexico, Canada, and the United States, and these are the 3 flags here. All right, so globalization is this kind of idea that, we don't want to be so separated by countries. We want to be more open with things, okay? When you're separated by countries and people are proud of their countries, it's not a bad thing. That sometimes leads to a lot of wars. We want to try and work more open together. I'm not sure you guys have ever heard of the EU. Okay, it's known as the European Union. Okay, things like NATO, okay, the United Nations. These things here are all globalized organizations. Okay, they want to have all these countries working closely together. So we want to center ourselves around trade. And basically, there was this agreement between the US, Canada, and Mexico where countries will trade with one another openly with no tariffs. Okay, and it seems like something that doesn't seem like a big deal, but if we can get stuff from Canada for a cheap price and they can get the stuff for us, that's going to help out all 3 of our economies. So instead of competing with Canada, instead of competing with Mexico, we want to all work together as a team to bring in as much money and as many products as we can to our countries. All right? Because, like anything else, competition has its good things, but if you're working together as a team, that's maybe a good thing as well. And that's what happens. Our economy does very well throughout this time in the 90s. Bill Clinton, I think, is still the only president in the last 40 years to balance the budget. What that means is we didn't spend more than we brought in. All right, so like right now, as a country, like I know just President Biden came out like a week ago saying that he wants to have a $6 trillion budget plan. Okay. Well, our taxpayer dollars only bring in like 2.1 trillion. So that's not balancing a budget. Okay, we're spending more than we're actually bringing in. Under Clinton, we didn't. If we spent $1 trillion, we were bringing in $1 trillion. That means we weren't in any debt. And that's a pretty rare thing for us. Okay, because you know how much debt we're in right now. Okay, so NAFTA was something that was put into place to kind of have this open trade agreement, and this really benefited our economy at the time. Now, one of the problems that developed in the 2000s, the late 2000s, 2010s rather, we started shipping all of our jobs out to other countries. We started, because of globalization, sending all of our work and jobs out there to have it created. So like my wife, Teacher Bags Company, she makes her products out in China right now. She doesn't make them here. So if she's not making them here, obviously it's less help for our economy. All right. So the idea was, you know what, if we can sell the products here, that's great, but we're losing out on jobs. So in the late 2010s, a lot of people were losing jobs because of globalization. All these jobs were out in other countries. All right. So you couldn't get a job, in a motor vehicle factory because there were none here. All right. So it's just one of those things that like you want to try and have, some, but not all. All right, let's give a shot to these here. Question in gray at the top. The North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, and the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, which I don't even know what that is, I'll be honest, have encouraged countries to what? One is correct. Participate in the global economy. Okay? Which statement accurately describes the results of the 1993 adoption of NAFTA? Okay, we got a couple ones back to back. Okay, no tariffs were allowed. The three largest nations in North America didn't have any tariffs and had open trade with one another. Okay, last thing for today, let's start with his impeachment. This happens late in his second term. I think he's a lot more popular until his impeachment. I'm not going to say it completely ruins his presidency, but this is not particularly a great moment, just from a character level necessarily. So let's go through this. We'll try and handle this as maturely as possible because this has to do with the sexual relationship. So start with that first part there. Okay. So there was a situation that broke out. If you guys heard Whitewater, that was something separate, but that investigation, people started digging into Clinton a little bit more. They started realizing that he was maybe not doing the most proper relationship with some of the people that work for him. So there was a young intern there, a woman by the name of Monica Lewinsky, and their relationship went beyond a platonic relationship, meaning that it went beyond just, boss and worker sort of thing. And there was some pretty good accounts that he had a sexual relationship with Monica Lewinsky, unfortunately, in the Oval Office. That's where the president works. That's in the White House. So that is not a good situation. Okay. Now, I need to be open and honest with you guys here. He was not the first president to have sexual relationships with people other than his wife, okay? There was a very famous one who maybe you guys know, maybe you don't. There was a president in our history who pretty much openly did against his wife that was a very popular president for us. Does anyone know who that is or was? I didn't talk about it in class, but it definitely was something that was pretty much well known. Not FDR, good try. Not FDR, though I mean, maybe. Yeah, it's JFK. Okay, JFK had a lot of relationships with a lot of different women. Okay, and like pretty well known. Okay, one of which was someone related to someone in the mafia. Okay, Marilyn Monroe was never confirmed, but highly thought to be. Okay, there was an affair with Marilyn Monroe, and a lot of people in the country were disappointed, obviously. But it wasn't. It was just something at the time that like people kind of accepted. So when I say Clinton's not the first one, it's probably the truth. Okay, and we know JFK for sure, and I'm sure there were many others. My point was this: it is not wrong in terms of president of having affairs. It's a kind of sleazy thing. It is something you should never encourage, but is not improper by the Constitution. Okay, so having the inappropriate sexual relationship was not what got him put on trial. Okay, you can go into the consent thing a little bit, but Monica Lewinsky would be the first to tell you she consented to it. Okay, she consented to it. It's a little bit of a problem because he's the president of the United States and she works for him. That's a whole separate thing, but she did consent to it and she would admit that. Okay, yes, Aura, that's going to be more of the issue. So okay, this is where he really screwed up. And this is where the problem comes in. So let's take a look here. This was a very, 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 very famous, I remember as a kid, I'll tell you my age soon if you don't know. I remember as a kid watching this exact interview you're about to see, where he said this very famous speech. So let's take a look.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Hassan. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please be seated. Now, I have to go back to work on my State of the Union speech. And I worked on it till pretty late last night. But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you.
Yeah, that ended up being, he ended up lying. So yeah, that was the issue. If he had just come out and said it, he doesn't get impeached. He claimed that he had no sexual relationship with Monica Lewinsky, and that was not true. Now, that was a press conference. You could lie during a press conference, but what problem was is what Ora said, and I think Maheen said, he ended up lying when he went under oath, and he was under investigation. And that is a problem. That is known as, I'm sure you guys know at this point, that is known as perjury. That is a crime. Guys, if you ever get put on trial, tell the truth. All right? Lying about it makes everything 10 times worse. Okay? If he just admitted to it and said it, he looks bad, but he doesn't get impeached. He gets impeached. So let's talk about the impeachment trial a little bit. It happens in 1998, 1999. He was put on trial for perjury, basically lying under oath, and obstruction of justice. There were 2 charges. The second one, obstruction of justice, really, he basically, they said that he tried to encourage people to lie on his behalf. That one really didn't stick as much. The big one was perjury. Okay, so he got impeached in 2 charges. They put him under investigation and basically voted as a Congress. He was impeached by the House of Representatives. Okay, the same thing happened to Andrew Johnson. The same thing happened to Donald Trump twice now. But then has to be convicted with 2/3 of the vote in the Senate. And I don't even think it was close when they voted in the Senate. Senate, I'm going to look it up with the numbers. Impeachment vote for Clinton. Okay, the vote ended up being only 45 senators voted to convict. They needed 67. So he was well short. He was well short of being impeached and removed from office. But it was a huge stain on his presidency. And I think people just lost a lot of trust in him because, the sleaziness, yes, but the lying doesn't help. All right, and I think it goes into the honest statement. These presidents make mistakes. In their personal lives, as acting as presidents, they're human beings like anyone else. I'm not making an excuse for what he did. Obviously, it's just they're human beings. I would never. One thing I encourage you guys: don't look at the president, as like a god. They're not. They're human beings just like us. Hopefully they hold themselves to a high standard. Some presidents do, some presidents don't, and this stuff unfortunately happens. I'm sure Hillary Clinton was very, very pissed. I know for a fact JFK's wife, who many people believed, at the time was like the best possible woman in America. I mean, everyone loved her. Yeah, they put up with it a little bit. I'm pretty sure they knew what was going on, especially Jackie Kennedy. But they stayed loyal through the marriage, and that has their pros and cons with it too. But I would definitely say, I know for a fact Hillary Clinton was furious, but I think they stayed together and they still are together. They just had to work through it. Relationships are complicated sometimes, and the same goes if you're president and first lady. Yeah, it's tough. I'm not quite sure how either, but when you really have been together, with someone for so long, for years, decades, maybe you try and work it through. But I'm not a life coach. Okay, I'm not going to try and even go into that. No, yeah, for sure, Anicia. It's not it's not something that any one should be doing. All right, and but these people do make mistakes. And he was held accountable. He was impeached. You know, the Senate voted to not acquit him. Basically, they said that his offense was not strong enough to be removed as president. It was more of a personal issue and didn't really affect his presidency. You could see arguments for both sides, but, you know, that's ultimately what happened. It also just so happened it was in 1999. He was coming out of office in 2000, so some people just probably figured just let him finish out his presidency. And that's kind of what happened there. All right. Besides that, I think they're oh, sorry, I missed that, Rosemary, probably because it was in public view too. Yeah. Yeah, it gets complicated, I'm sure, for sure. And I'm not sure if you heard in the brain pop, Hillary Clinton was running for Senate in 2000. So I don't know if like a divorce maybe looks bad for a president. I don't know. I don't know the details of it, but it's a crappy situation for sure. All right. So if you have all the notes taken down, we're just going to finish with some Regents questions, and then you guys are done and can leave and get out of here. Oh, just one. One similarity shared by Andrew Johnson and President Bill Clinton is that both did what? 2 is good. All right, you guys can go. Have a good rest of your day, and I will see you all on Friday. You are off tomorrow. Sure, Sanjita, I'll get it up as soon as I can. I'd say by 2 o'clock it should be up.